I show 9:31.
Good morning, everyone. Let's call the meeting of the Western Municipal Water District to order, please. And Tammy, if we could have a roll call.
Good morning. Director Torres. Director Denstedt.
Good morning, I'm present.
Director Roten.
I am here.
Director Risby. President Gardner.
I am here.
Thank you, President Gardner. You do have a quorum this morning.
Great, thank you very much. That brings us to the flag salute. Today, we're going to be led by Misha Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez, glad to have you with us.
Good morning,
Would
everyone.
you tell us a bit about you, please?
My name is Misael Hernandez. I'm an operations technician with the water quality team, and I've been with Western for about a year now.
Great, welcome.
Thank you. So please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, Tammy, do we have any public comments?
We do not. I've received no written comments, and we have no requests to speak in the audience or on Zoom.
Okay, great, thank you. Brings us to presentations. Mr. Miller.
Well, our buttons, we have to use our buttons again, right?
Yes, the buttons are now active.
It was easier when you were just doing it for us. That's a big effort to get up there and push that button. Well, we're very fortunate to have our advocates from Sacramento with us today. So Ed and Carolyn are going to give us a little update on what's happened over the last year and what we're looking forward to for this year. So Ed Manning and Carolyn Jensen, thank you for coming all the way down here. It's great to hear from you. It's all yours.
You're on.
So we were trying to do this in the fall, but got a little delay. So here we are. And it's a new year, and there's lots going on in terms of both budget and legislation. We'll start with a little overview. And of course, yesterday was Election Day, which consumes everyone in Sacramento, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But the biggest thing right now dominating Sacramento is the budget and the shortfall. And so during COVID, we had record surpluses for a variety of reasons. The state economy overperformed, and there was a ton of influx of federal dollars. That increased the amount of spending that we had. And some of it was one-time money, but it was built into the budget. And so, lo and behold, the federal funding went away. The economy did not continue to perform like a rocket ship. And so we have, in-year and out-year budget shortfall. The receipts for the general fund continue to decline. I think last month we were $5 billion short. And that's been a pattern. So, we're looking at a budget shortfall of between, 30 billion this year and 80, maybe up to 100, depending on whose numbers you believe. And so, one of the biggest things that we see this year is there's a big gap between what the Department of Finance says the deficit is. When they introduced the budget in January, they said it was about 38 billion. The Legislative Analyst's Office, which is independent, said it's 78. So that's a big, big chasm. That's 40 billion, and the number is higher than what LAO predicted based on the receipts. So we're looking at a significant deficit and that's going to result in meaningful cuts in a number of places. And the governor will be putting out what we call the May revised budget, and that's where they really have to solidify their numbers, because you're ground truthing what the receipts are. In January, you're sort of hoping. In May, you have to sort of face reality. So that'll be sobering. On the next slide, just a quick overview of where we are in the legislative process. So this is the second year of a 2-year legislative session. That means, we've got some bills that died last year, some bills that survived and are in the second house or just got passed out of the first house, a few, and then new bills introduced all together. So we had about 2,124 bills introduced. So far, 1,505 in the Assembly and 619 in the Senate this year. So those bills are introduced. They're being assigned to committee for hearings now. And many of those bills are what we call spot bills, meaning they don't really have much contents in them. And what happens is the bills come up, they show up in print, and they have 30 days to put real language in them so they can be heard. So we will get a slew of amendments over the next several weeks as those bills all get amended. And there's always great surprises when the real language shows up. So, next slide. Last year, we had priorities for our legislative efforts like we do every year. So obviously, one of the big things that we have emphasized, and particularly the last 2 years, is to support bold and immediate action to increase statewide water supply by infrastructure investments in water storage, conveyance, and local supply. We've been looking to do this both in terms of potential climate bond, budget, and legislative. And we'll talk a little bit about the legislative effort in a minute. We have continued, and we've been doing this for over a decade now, more than that. Actually, we're up to 15 years, since 2009, to oppose measures that would delay or halt Delta Conveyance Project, believe it or not. And this, it's a little depressing for me, having worked on this issue for so many years, that I have a feeling my kids will see this project and I won't. But there's still a Delta Conveyance Project, and it's going through the EIR process now, and getting closer, but still a ways away. Sometimes we forget, but it's still there and it's still important. One of the other themes that we've had for a number of years is to protect our local finances and your ability to control your own financial destiny and make sure the state doesn't dip into your budgets and to your ratepayers. That's been an ongoing fight for the last 25 years. It's a lot less now than it used to be back in the good old days when we had ERAF shifts and stuff like that, but it's still important. And then last is we've dealt with water conservation a lot over the last probably 6, 7, 8 years, and we've been trying to support water conservation, but in a cost-effective and practical way that gives us some flexibility. And that's been an up and down battle with the state as they try to superimpose requirements that are somewhat draconian and not understanding where we are in terms of our own efforts and how much we've done already. So that's a quick overview of our priorities. Next slide, please. And talk a little bit about sort of the things we've been doing proactively and some of the actual bills that we've been trying to either stop or get amendments to. So one of the big efforts that your team, Craig and Sarah and Michael, have led is the California Water for All education effort, which is an effort we're in probably the second year, right? I think. It's gone by fast, but with water agencies from across the state to do proactive education about the need for water infrastructure investment and how bad things really were during the drought, and that despite our efforts, we have a great vulnerability. And as climate change impacts us, that vulnerability is increasing, not decreasing, especially since the system was designed and built before the current climate models became a reality. And so that's been very, very successful in terms of heightening awareness and getting support from water agencies all over the state. And it's an ongoing effort and has been very impactful in terms of our ability to start to reshape the debate on the future of water policy in the state. And related to that is SB 366, which is the bill that candidly us have spearheaded from the beginning, which is a CMUA-sponsored bill to revise the California Water Plan to, for the first time, have long-term water supply targets. Believe it or not, you've probably heard your team tell you this, but we have a California Water Plan and we have no targets. So we don't really know what we're planning for. So it's a litany of stuff with no real goals or objectives or a defined plan on how to get from here to there. Or any economic analysis that shows us what the consequences are of not getting there. And so this bill really fundamentally changes that with goals for 2030, goals for 2040 and beyond, and really trying to allow a forum for the water community to engage and try to shape a meaningful plan that will help guide future investments, and I think put pressure on the state to play more of a leadership role. That bill is in the second house. It's in it's Senator Caballero's bill. It's in the Assembly. We have a new committee chair there who we met with, had great discussions with, and I think that bill is going to get out, I hope. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think it's a lot better forum for us this year with a new chair and a new committee makeup. So the other issue that's been going on since the Brown administration during that drought is there was a suite of bills that were passed about making water conservation a way of life. There were follow-up bills, including a per gallon per day urban water usage bill. And the water board, state water board, has issued draft regulations that were very problematic for the water community. And without getting into the weeds of the urban water management plan requirements and the way that the bill we thought would give us some flexibility to exceed our goals in some areas, so indoor water use, but be able to maybe not perform as well on outdoor water use, but be able to figure out your overall savings and balance them to meet the target, because it really doesn't matter where the savings come from. There was zero flexibility in the regs, and so there was supposed to be some flexibility for the water agencies to be able to figure out how to get to their water budget without necessarily being prescriptive on every single element in your indoor or outdoor water use. And they did quite the opposite. It was very, very prescriptive so that there was zero flexibility. And so, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you're really focused on the overall water budget and performance, it doesn't matter as much where you're getting the savings from, as long as you're getting the savings someplace. And different water agencies are in different positions for a variety of reasons, including climate and where they are in terms of implementing their conservation programs. So ACWA and CMUA have been leading the charge on this. There are bills in the legislature to address this, and because if the water board doesn't fix the regs, we expect a real effort to try to get them fixed in the legislature, or put pressure on the water board to do their job. Another big issue, water rights. We fought two major water rights bills last year that would have significantly altered the stability of water rights in California for agencies, especially those that have pre-1914 water rights. And even though you don't have those water rights, there are member agencies who do, for example, LADWP. And, you know, there's a boomerang effect where if you destabilize the pre-1914 water rights for member agencies who have them, then they're going to go take more Met water, which means less Met water available for everybody else. And so you've got a major fight over destabilizing a lot of water rights, not just pre-1914, but all water rights. And we were able to stop both those bills in the Senate, but they're still there, and they could still come back to life, and so we're still very engaged. There are more bills that have been introduced this session, although there are spot bills at this time. They don't have language in them yet, real language, so we'll be monitoring that. But that issue is significant and ongoing. Water storage and management continues to be a theme. You know, we're still waiting for Sites Reservoir to maybe be built in our lifetime. I mean, I have more confidence in that one maybe being built in our lifetime, but that's, you know, that's ongoing. There are efforts in legislature on connection and capacity charges and fees to reduce or control those. A lot of those are housing bills. There's a Prop 218, a couple bills on Prop 218 reform, clarifying the process for Prop 218 challenges and trying to somewhat limit them, although it's constitutional, so legislature is somewhat hamstrung. There are continue to be bills on, specifically on SGMA, but groundwater management more generally. And the SGMA issue is complicated and difficult in some areas. Southern California, your area is mainly adjudicated basin, so it's a less of a problem here, generally speaking, with the legislation. But in some areas of the state, it's a challenge to get to the SGMA goals, and it's a challenge to get the legislature not to keep changing the rules, which is a problem when you've done your plans and then the rules change. So there is an effort to do climate bonds along with education bonds and housing bonds. I will say that last night's vote was a cautionary tale where Prop 1, the governor's main bond for homeless housing and mental illness treatment, was pretty much unopposed in terms of a campaign against it, and it's barely over 50% as of this morning. I don't know what that totally says, except that there may be reluctance of the voters in terms of taking on more debt right now, or it may be it could be any number of things. We won't know until we see polling after and see whether it passes, but it's certainly, I think, a warning sign for November about being strategic about what types of things the state decides to put on the ballot. It could hurt the efforts to get a climate bond and to have some water funding in there if people perceive that, you know, the voters may not be in the right frame of mind. But there's a lot of frustration, obviously, on the homeless issue, and that could be, so the Prop 1 vote could be specific to that issue, or it could be a broader problem. We'll have to dissect that. But the legislature will have to decide what, if any, bonds to pursue this year. We're hoping that there's a climate bond because there may be potential water funding in there for some water infrastructure, but it remains to be seen what the state's bonding capacity is and whether that is going to be prioritized. And then just quickly, there's new legislative leadership in both the Assembly and Senate this year. In the Assembly, it's Speaker Rivas, and in the Senate, it's Senator McGuire. Senator McGuire is from the North Coast. Assemblymember Rivas is from sort of the Central Coast area. And so it's geographically different leadership, and remains to be seen what their priorities are going to be moving forward. But it certainly is a time of change in the legislature, as we, figure out, we've got a lot of new members, a lot of new committee chairs, and we have a lot more members coming in. And that leads us to the next slide. It's an election year. So we've got, probably about another 25% turnover in the legislature, I'd say. For next year, we had over that this year. So most of the legislature will have turned over in the last several years. It is an election year. We had a primary. We've got a general election coming up. Odd number Senate seats are up. All the Assembly seats are up because those are every 2 years. Carolyn and I have, and Michael and everybody else probably have been looking at all the results. They're not final yet. Not a lot of, given the low voter turnout, there was a prospect there would be some real surprises. Without getting into all the really insider baseball stuff on North Coast districts you probably don't care about, but there really haven't been a lot of big surprises. But it is going to be probably a little bit a more competitive environment this fall in some of these races. There are a handful, as usual, of targeted seats where there'll be a real battle, but relatively unexciting election news in terms of any major upsets from our perspective. But all the votes haven't been counted yet, so as you know, California's slow in terms of counting votes, so we got a ways to go. And I think that covers everything we wanted to cover. Anything else? All right.
Great. Any questions from board members? Go ahead. We need to turn that on.
Thank you for this great presentation. Just a quick question. So when we're looking at such a big deficit in budget, what effects it can have on SB 366 passing through the legislature? It doesn't have a lot of
Yeah. Good question.
money. Yeah.
So there was a price. So every bill has to go both through a policy committee and then a fiscal committee. So in the Assembly, we're in the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. If we get it out of there, it has to go through the Assembly Appropriations Committee. And they decide which bills move forward to the floor based in part on their fiscal impacts. They had a price tag in the Senate, 2 million, was it? Yeah, it was over $1 million, I remember, which we thought was very high, given that the Department of Water Resources currently has to do a water plan, and we're changing it, not that significantly. So we will probably have a little bit of a discussion with DWR, Department of Water Resources, before Appropriations Committee as to what the real number should be. And given the deficit, you don't know what the legislature is going to do. I will tell you that when Schwarzenegger was governor, which seems ancient history, a lot of bills were dying that had virtually any price tag on them, because those are years when we were doing 5, 6, 7, 8 budgets to stay afloat. We're not nearly in as dire circumstance, but it remains to be seen. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that the legislature will look at the price tag, but understand that they're already responsible for doing this. We're not creating a new responsibility. I think that would be viewed differently. But we're going to have to try to manage that, and that is one place you can get stuck because of the cost. And sometimes they hide behind the cost as a reason not to do the bill. I don't think that'll be the case here, but we got a little ways to go there.
Do we have any feel where the governor is on 366?
No, they do not. The administration rarely takes a position on legislation early. They tend to wait till the very end to opine. I think once it gets out of policy committee, assuming it does, we will have a chance to engage them more directly. We have talked to the Department of Water Resources to get their input on the bill. We've done some amendments, and we'll be doing more to sort of address some issues they raised. They're the ones who would be recommending to the administration, to the governor, what position to take. We did have a meeting with the Resources Secretary over a year ago to discuss where to go with this bill. We will be following up with him. So we will be actively engaging them to make sure we get them in the right place.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Laura?
Yeah, I would also add that CMUA, as the sponsor of the bill, has been telling us that they're going to be working with the governor's office too. So I think that'll come from their side in addition to probably our side.
Right. Good. Director Dennstedt?
Ed, Carolyn, thank you for being here. Great to see you guys. Weather down here in Southern California a lot better than where you guys are at right now. It's really wet up there, isn't it? Let's talk sites. So are we really going to actually see some serious movement with sites? I mean, obviously, we're on the waiting list for Western. Metropolitan has got a big chunk of this. It's been put on their legislative priorities, which we were really excited to see this year come out for Met. So, you know, and obviously I'm going to continue to advocate for that. But what are we actually seeing? Are we really seeing some traction and some promise? Or is there something else that we can do to twist that in a forward motion?
I mean, the Resources Secretary has appeared and been asked this question many times in the last year or 2 years in front of the legislature and especially in the budget process. And the governor, when he put out his water plan, a year ago or so, this was a point of emphasis in terms of what the water need was and that this needed to get done. It is in the permitting process now. That process, as you know, is not for the faint of heart and can be lengthy. So it's not, it's hard to track for us because there are multiple federal and state permitting processes they need to go through, whether it's from the Army Corps or from State Water Board or, a water rights process, waste discharge permits. I mean, there's just myriad things they have to do. And so it seems to be a priority. The Northern California water agencies who have formed this JPA are very engaged, trying to move it forward. We have not heard a lot of complaints in terms of going to the legislature and saying there are major obstacles at this point. So that's a good sign. That was not necessarily the case a number of years ago. So from the outside looking in, it seems like it's going through the process and they're trying focus to try to get it done. But it's very difficult for us to know, Director, whether, a particular agency is being difficult because we're not close enough to it to know that. But I'm sure Metropolitan's attorneys and folks are tracking it more closely. But for now, all we can tell is that it's a priority and that they're committed to try to get it done.
Okay. No, fair enough. I mean, I was hoping for some inside baseball, but that's all right.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's it's in that sort of black hole of permitting, and
Right.
that's the right place for it to be, but it's also a very difficult place to be. So
All right. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Other questions or comments? If not, thank you both very much. I hope you get back home in a smooth ride, not a bumpy one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, brings us to the consent calendar. Anybody wish to pull anything?
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Tammy, just to confirm, we have no public comment on consent calendar?
That is correct.
Okay. When the system is ready, would you please do a roll call vote?
Director Dennstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Risby?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller, do we have anything to add to the agenda?
Nothing to add today?
Okay. We have 3 action items. The first is receive and file the investment report by Chandler Asset Management. Craig?
All right, thank you. As we get on a regular basis, Dan Delaney is here representing Chandler. We're happy to hear from him again. Maybe he has some insight on Sites Reservoir. I don't know. We can ask him at the end, but. But Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Great to be here as always. Good morning, everyone. So I'll try and keep it concise, talk a bit about the economy and dive into the 2 portfolios, the Operating Reserve and Viva Trust. So to start, the economy is on, right now, a pretty strong footing. I think for the last 6 quarters, we've had above average trend growth, far more resilient than us and most market participants thought. Jobs are plentiful, wages are growing above the rate of inflation, household balance sheets are in really good shape. That keeps consumers going out and spending and the economic wheel turning. The driving force behind that, I have to borrow from my colleagues here and talking about debt, is unfortunately the level of government spending. So obviously when we went through the pandemic, there was a very high level of emergency spending, and that was expected to really start to tail off as we got through COVID, and it really hasn't decelerated as much as we thought. So budget deficits are still rising, the government debt is growing. That's a problem down the long run. For now, it's also creating somewhat of a problem in terms of inflation. Inflation is coming down, but not as quickly as everyone had hoped. So the Fed has a 2% inflation target. We're hovering around 3% right now, just because the overall level of economic activity is so strong. Well, what does that mean? It means that rates are probably going to stay a bit higher for a little bit longer. Obviously, that has implications for households that want to go out and purchase a home. It has implications for businesses like yourselves in terms of the cost of raising capital. For us as investment managers on your behalf, it's somewhat of a good thing in that we get to enjoy a higher level of investment income, which is obviously good for you in some way as well. It also keeps a certain level of discipline, I think, in terms of the stock market, which is part of your investment portfolio as well, such that we don't go through a period of a bubble, if you like, which seems to be brewing in certain sectors right now, because fixed income now, finally, after about 10 years, is a viable alternative to owning stocks. So that's a good thing. I did want to dive into a bit more detail into the individual portfolios. So if I can pull up the pages here, I'm just going to flip to the operating reserve first. So objectives, safety, liquidity, and lastly, return. We have a benchmark for the operating reserve. It's a 1 to 10-year Treasury and Agency benchmark, and we want to outperform it over time, and we do that through diversification across a number of high-quality fixed income sectors. This is the most important page, the compliance page. We're in compliance with code and your investment policy, which is reviewed every year. We reviewed it in April last year, and we'll make another review April this year. Along the way, we've made a few tweaks, but it's really in good shape. Overall, we have all the flexibility we need to add value to your portfolio, which hopefully you'll see in a couple slides' time. This is a snapshot of the portfolio as of the end of December compared to the end of September. And you'll see right at the bottom, the market value went up quite handsomely by almost $10 million. So in the fourth quarter, all assets did really well. The Fed basically indicated they were done in terms of raising rates, not cutting, but they're done in terms of raising rates anymore. And stocks and bonds did very, very well. So you saw market yields fall from 5.21% on that right-hand column to 4.44%. As yields go down, bond prices go up. You can also see that the duration of the portfolio is around 3.5 years, so fairly short, particularly as we're talking about deficits. We're more concerned right now at Chandler about long-term yields, 10, 30-year Treasury yields. Where should they be if the government keeps growing its deficit? They should probably higher than where they are right now. So that really doesn't fall into your domain. It's not so much of a concern. And you can see the average purchase yield is creeping up ever so slightly, generating around 5 to 6 million of annual income for the portfolio. This year it's going to go up even more. So, like I said, it's a good thing that rates are going to stay higher. You'll generate more income. We run a diversified portfolio. Like I said, we invest across a number of high-quality fixed income sectors. At the core of it, you have treasuries and agencies. 50% plus of your portfolio if we went into a dire economic environment, you can liquidate them easily, no problem. And this is the returns. So in the fourth quarter, we had a really good return, like I said, almost 4%, which was modestly above that of the benchmark, 3.98 versus 3.87. For the year, after the worst year in history, in 2022, we returned almost 5%. And we outperformed the benchmark by more than 0.5%, which we were really happy about. Like I said, the goal is to add value. And if you go all the way back since we started the mandate, which is in 2001, we've returned almost the same, about 0.4, 0.5% above the benchmark. And I ran an analysis on that yesterday, and that's resulted in about $11 million of additional returns for the district over that time frame. So I'm pretty happy with that. Can talk a little about the VIBA Trust. Again, the objectives are to grow the portfolio over the long term, and we have a 7% implicit annualized return rate for the VIBA Trust. And again, it's diversification, but in this case, diversifying across different assets, including equities, to generate that higher level of return. The compliance statement you can see here, we're in compliance with all the parameters. They're quite broad. In reality, our asset allocation follows a far more narrow allocation, roughly 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds and real estate, as you can see here. Just under 60% in stocks and diversified across all different types of stocks, domestic and international, small and big. Real estate, 7%. Bonds, now doing more of the heavy lifting in the portfolio, finally, around 35%. And again, the returns, really a great fourth quarter. Like the fixed income market, it really made the year up 10% for the portfolio, outperforming the benchmark at around 9.4%. For the year, just under 14%, not too shabby, but it did underperform the benchmark at just under 16%. Last year, you really saw the big tech companies do very, very well. There's more of those in the benchmark than in your portfolio. We'd rather stay more diversified. Over the longer term, you can see if we go back to that since inception number, just over 7%, very close to that of the benchmark, and it's hitting your bogey in terms of the expected return for the VIBA Trust. The last thing I wanted to point out is that we set up a liquidity account for the district in April of 2023. And that was an account which was an alternative to a checking account and an alternative to a number of government pools that are available, including LAIF. And pleased to say that that account has generated an investment income of around $1 million, which is about $1 million more than a checking account. And it's about $300,000 more than a local government investment pool alternative. So I just wanted to mention that and really hat tip staff, Peter and the team, for being proactive. That's real money going back to the district. That arbitrage still exists, but now what we're looking to do is take some of the excess liquidity that the district has and put some of it into the longer term operating fund. Now that rates are where they are at attractive level and likely peaking, and that should keep the district in good stead for the long term. So with that was very quick. I know I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anyone have questions? Go ahead.
So this year, there have been such a large number of layoffs from the tech sector, right? Do you see that impacting, how do you see that impacting the markets later in the year?
There has been high-profile layoffs, and that
Yeah.
always makes the headlines. The reality is that's a small percentage of the economy. It's a few percent, but obviously big companies that make up a larger part of the stock market. And we're always reminded that the stock market is not necessarily the economy. And if you look at the jobs that we're creating, we'll get another report this Friday. We're actually accelerating in terms of job growth, 250,000 jobs now on average every month, which has picked up from the last month. And a lot of that is in the service sector of the economy. Our thought is that, there are high-profile layoffs in these tech companies, but there's so much going on in tech, particularly with the AI, that'll get pretty quickly recycled. But to answer your question, as much as you see that, the data tells us that jobs are still very plentiful.
Good.
And if you look at the job openings, which is something we also look at, there's almost 2-to-1 openings for every unemployed. It's a very, very healthy level of the labor market right now.
Other questions? Brenda?
Question, so obviously we just had Super Tuesday. It's a presidential election year. Are you expecting any volatility in the market due to the election that'll be later on in the year? Because things are going to get kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think we're due some. We've had such a strong start to the year, and as we near in on that election date, there probably will be some. For us, like I said towards the beginning, what worries us as bond investors over the longer term is this level of deficit and the level of government spending. It's really hard to see right now that the candidates looking to change that. I think both have pretty expansionary policies, we think. So that could cause some volatility in the fixed income market. But again, you're likely to see that volatility occur more in the longer dated part of the market, so 10, 30-year bonds, as investors try and work out, well, what should the premium be for owning those bonds over the long term if the deficit issue is not going to go away? Your portfolio is towards the short end. You have an average duration of around 3.5 years. So those bonds will be more closely tied to where Fed policy is heading. So you're somewhat insulated. But
Okay.
Yes, we would expect more volatility in both the stock and fixed income markets, and for that reason.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Good job as always.
Thank you.
You want a motion for receive and file?
Yes, we probably should do that.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. When the system is ready, Tammy?
Director Denstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0.
Great, thank you. Next item is to reaffirm adoption of the resolution appointing board representation to SAPA. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, we don't need much of a presentation on this. Steph had a typo in the resolution number, so we got to correct that. So if the board doesn't mind, if you would go ahead and help us correct that, that'd be great. No change to the recommendation or anything.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. When the system is ready.
Director Denstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. And our last business item is approved terms and conditions for the construction, operation, and maintenance of proposed Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority, RCRA, facilities.
So Ryan's going to give the presentation, but as I've talked to the board in the past, this is a long time coming. We've been trying to figure out, in fact, before I started at Western, I was working on a change of use permit with the state to be able to use recycled water from RCRA. So I've been working on this for a long time. So we're getting a lot closer. Ryan has done a fabulous job with Gary Miller kind of leading the way at RCRA, and not sure the board's aware of this. We hired Paul Jones to come in and help facilitate a business model for RCRA recycling with all the parties. So this has been very complicated. And so Ryan is going to talk about the terms and conditions for the recycled water program.
Yep, thanks, Craig. Good morning, President Gardner and members of the board. As always, I hope you're doing well. This is actually a really exciting presentation and a really good step forward. Like Craig said, this has been a long time coming. So these are just the terms and conditions, and we'll be coming back to you probably next month with formal agreements to make these projects actually happen. But it's pretty exciting for those of us that have been working on it for a long time. So you've seen this presentation at EOWR, excuse me, but I'll buzz through it pretty quickly. As you know, RCRA is a Joint Powers Authority, a JPA, 5 members, cities of Corona, Norco, Home Garden Sanitation District, Harupa Community Service District, as well as Western. Currently, it's a 14 million gallons per day MGD capacity-wise. Originally, it was 8 MGD, and it was expanded a couple years ago. And as you all know, Western is the operator of that facility. Currently, we're discharging about 7.77 million gallons per day to the Santa Ana River. This is the water that we're proposing to reuse, right? So all that's going down into Prado, into Orange County. As Craig mentioned, Western and the team were able to secure a change of use order in 18 to get full allocation or use of all of the water that is currently going into RCRA and future water as growth adds more supply to the system. What are we going to use the water for? Direct use, internal transfers, external transfers, and sales. Last year, this board and others approved an MOU to kind of move this ball forward. And we are still in negotiations with IUA to sell some of this RCRA recycled water to them. They have a extensive system that they've already constructed, so our hope is to make a deal with them and move that ball forward. And Craig mentioned Paul Jones, our facilitator at RCRA, is helping us work with them. So more to come on that one. You've seen this visual on the left-hand side. It's an aerial view of RCRA itself. There's 3 colors on this slide. The green one is what we call the northerly pipeline. It's going to be a 24-inch line that takes water from the proposed pump station up towards IUA's system. You see the pump station itself is right there, kind of smack dab in the middle of RCRA, and Western will own and operate that going forward. And then on the right, it's a little hard to see, but the light blue, there's a southerly pipeline that will take recycled water down towards Corona. So in the terms and conditions that are before you today, there are 2 key projects. The first one is a pump station at RCRA. Estimated cost $22.1 million. You can see Western's portion of that is $2.867 million. We did get good news earlier this week that the bids came in lower than estimated. So fingers crossed those bids are good and we can move forward with those. The second project is what we call the northerly pipeline. This is the one that's going to go up towards IUA. Estimated cost of $16.7 million. You can see Western's cost share is $2.5 million. So in summary, RCRA is going to own and operate the on-site pump station. JCSD, who has done us all a good favor and moved the ball forward on moving the project, they are going to own and operate the northerly pipeline. They're the ones that received the bids for that pump station. So they're leading the charge on that one. And then the take-home message for this board is Western's requested capacity is 1.54 MGD, which is about 15% of the capacity of the pump station and the pipeline. And that currently equates to about $5.4 million. Like I said, we just got some bids in, so it looks like it may be lower. Don't quote me yet. We'll see how it turns out, but it's good news. So that's the ask. Let's see. Okay, next steps and schedule. We hopefully today the board's comfortable approving the terms and conditions. Regional pump station, we just received those bids, so that's moving forward. Northerly pipeline, that process will go forward during May and June of this year. So the requested action today is to approve the terms and conditions for construction, operations, and maintenance of the proposed new RCRA recycled water facilities. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. So RCRA will own it. Western staff operates RCRA. Our staff will be operating the pump station. pipeline, I don't know, joint Sure.
JCSD will own and operate the pipeline.
own and operate the pipeline. JCSD has shown great leadership in really trying to move this whole program forward. They have a more direct need, although we all have a need, but they feel the urgency. And so Chris Birch has really stepped up and made a lot of commitments to get this project going. So I really appreciate his efforts. And I will say that Gary Miller on our staff, who's the RCRA administrator, has done a fabulous job herding all the cats, because everybody, you know, anytime you're doing term sheets with a whole bunch of different agencies, you have a whole bunch of different opinions on what should happen. But fundamentally, you know, it's a over a $5 million investment for Western. But right now, all of the effluent we just release for free into the river. And Orange County Water District collects almost all of it and turns it into drinking water and sells it. So this is our opportunity to invest $5 million to start generating revenue. And so what Ryan works on is, well, how much revenue are we going to generate? Let's make sure that the business model works. It works. So this is a really good thing, to fully reuse water. Well, I take that back. It's already fully reused because Orange County Water District is capturing it, reusing it. This is what I talk about with the rest of the state. It's like our watershed is trying to figure out how to get 3 uses out of every drop of water before it goes to the ocean, not 1. And so this gives us another use of this water, and it really works for the purpose that it's intended.
Questions or comments? Director Rizvi?
Go ahead.
Ryan, just a quick question. Is IEUA the only one that's interested in entering into a contract for the water?
No,
There
there
is
are
an-
some other parties that are interested,
There are more
Um,
parties.
and we're working through those to see what,
Okay.
Yeah.
There
No,
are-
We're
I-
trying to
I
start a
just-
bidding war.
Yeah, no. I
there
mean,
are
I
more
was just kind
parties,
of,
yes.
do we have a waiting list, you know?
Not yet, but there are more parties
kinda
interested.
Wanting to know what that kind of looked like.
uh,
Without, I mean, if we don't want to,
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the water world, right? You know, our career, my career was about getting rid of wastewater, and now we have a competitive environment to buy it. So it's good. And you know, we've been working with IUA for some time. They've just asked for a little bit of a timeout, literally a timeout, because they have a lot of new staff at the upper levels at IUA. And so, you know, they're asking the same questions that we ask. You know, their CFO wants to ensure that it's the right business model for IUA. And their water resources people want to make sure that they're not committing to buy water long-term that they actually can't use, and then they would just release it to the river. So they just have a couple of boxes they want to check. But in the meantime, we've been approached by someone else that said, well, we want it, so that's a good thing. So
Right.
we have a plan and a backup.
okay, no, I just wanted to make sure we understood what the priority
Yep.
placeholders are. And, you know, if we've got people within the actual group that were interested in doing that, or if we hit them up and they kind of declined or passed the ball at this time, or whatever they did. So I was just kind of,
No, and it's really good to have Ryan, who has great relationships in the Chino Basin. And so people come to him and ask what's going on, and so he's done a great job of securing some backups.
no, for sure. I mean, for all I know, he's opened the boardroom up and he's calling in bidders and giving them paddles to bid on what we've got. So I don't know.
As long as we can
process.
bring a
Hey.
deal to the board that makes sense for our board, that'd be great.
No, just a question. I mean, obviously, we're all in this together. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It's not about fighting each other. This is about moving water around and making sure that it's taking care of the IE. So,
I want to also, I'm remiss, I should also compliment Corona, City of Corona. Tom Moody has been a real leader on this program too, and they're in a unique position because they can actually use the water for their own system, so that southern, the light blue pipeline, they can use, but you know, they haven't been ready to use that, but he's been driving that this is the right thing to do. And they may actually decide to send water north, some of their water north. So we'll see. But what we're doing is building a program that has a lot of flexibility in it so that, we may actually end up doing a deal with Corona.
Yeah.
They may want to buy our share and we can send it south, or we can send it north to IUA.
No, for sure, and that's what I wanted to hear, so, thank you for that answer, and I, move to approve this item, Mr. President.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it, and as a chair for RCRA right now, I've seen how hard the staff has worked on this. It has, for last almost 4 years, I've seen when I just joined RCRA, that's where we had gotten Pajuja and Wells to, come and work on this, and this has been very exciting for us to see this coming, here right now in such a short time. So I'm, super excited to move it forward and see, get this going for us. So,
Great.
thank you all.
Any other questions? Tammy, do you have any public comment? Okay, then whenever the system is ready.
Director Denstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, reports. Mr. General Counsel.
Yes, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, I've got some handouts on some new laws. If you wouldn't mind passing those. These are on new housing laws that the legislature passed this last year. You'll see that the legislature continues to limit local agencies' ability to regulate accessory dwelling units, which are additional units usually in the backyard or side yard of houses. The legislature is allowing those to be basically parceled off if the owner of the property wants to, and is prohibiting cities from requiring that the property, the accessory dwelling unit, be owned by somebody. So it allows for rental of these accessory dwelling units. There are a number of other bills, but I wanted to highlight that one because a lot of times we hear from residents and neighbors about their frustration with these accessory dwelling units. Unfortunately, the legislature is kind of hamstringing local agencies' ability to regulate them. There are other bills in there. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Great. Mr. General Manager.
All right, I have a few things. Kind of the hot topic that we'll be talking after this meeting with Director Denstedt and Director Gardner about is the Met budget and the Met rates. So this is all-encompassing up at Metropolitan. They released in their committee their preliminary proposed rate increases of 13% next year and 8% the following year. They know that there's lots of workshops to come. There will be lots of proposals to do different things. We're working on a proposal ourselves. There's a lot of discussion about changing Met's revenue model away from a variable rates based model, which is very, I would call it very dangerous, because if your revenue is all driven by your water sales, and then you have a year like last year where it rains like crazy and your demands go down, your revenue drops drastically. And so, their revenue was like $300 million below their projections because of the hydrology. Well, that to us isn't a very stable financial picture. So we're trying to really develop the collaboration and with our fellow Met member agencies, hopefully through our caucus, again, to start pushing that we need to have a multifaceted revenue structure, which would include more fixed revenue, which would come in the form of ad valorem taxes that would be added. So that's always been thought of controversial, but when you look at the numbers, the tax implications from that are very, very minor. We're talking about on the order of $25 per household per year that would really stabilize Met's rates. So it's getting a lot of traction preliminarily. We'll see what happens, but the push is to have the budget done by April. So we got a long time to talk about this still. So there's going to be lots going on.
Can I ask a quick question? So if it were to go to the ad valorem tax, is that safeguarded to only go to Met? Like the state couldn't swoop in and
No,
take
it's,
it?
so Metropolitan already has it safeguarded and already uses the tool. So you pay a little bit of property tax to Metropolitan. And, you know, I don't want to bore you with the weeds, but it's 0.0035%. And Met has the ability to charge that because that money goes to offsetting their state water project costs. But their state water project costs are way up here, and that revenue doesn't even come close to meeting what their overall costs are. So they have all this headroom. They're allowed to raise money to pay for all of their state water project costs. So just with a board action, they can increase the 0.0035% to something else. And I think the maximum, Kevin may yell at me on Zoom, but I think it's 0.018. So
That's
they have
correct.
A lot of headroom. Wait, Kevin, what?
He said it's
You-
correct.
Did
You
you
are
say you're right,
correct.
Mr. General Manager?
You are right, Mr. Miller. Of course, you're always right, but in particular this time.
I listen to him when he talks.
Yeah. So it's guaranteed to go to that?
No. They have the ability to raise it above 0.0035. They can select, but they can't go above the 0.018.
Yeah, okay, so I guess my question was, if they raise it and they take in more money, it for sure goes to Met?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
was my
No, it's not
main
a state
question.
tax. This is a
Yeah.
Met
Okay,
ad valorem.
thank you.
Director Risby.
Silly question. Why haven't they done this already?
I would recharacterize your question as not a silly question at all. They actually generated a really interesting graphic, and maybe we can bring this back at the Finance Committee or something else to give you a briefing before they actually take the action. But they went through history, and originally, Metropolitan only had property tax. So the Colorado River Aqueduct, remember when you see those old black and white videos from the 20s of the general manager at brand new Met saying, we have to have a vote of the public to generate property tax revenue so we can build the Colorado River Aqueduct. It's the most important thing Southern California will ever do. So it was 100% property tax revenue from the start. And then as they've retired the bonds, so they paid off those bonds, they dropped it and they started selling a lot of water. So they made this transition from property tax to water sales. Well, I think, Craig thinks, Western doesn't think, Craig thinks that, they went overboard. They still need fixed revenue. So this is kind of a swing a little bit back. But, sorry, Mr. CFO, can you give us another number from above? What was the percentage back in the early days, Kevin?
Oh, it was equally, probably triple what it is today, triple, quadruple. It was very high. I have that
I think
presentation.
I think we can go up to 0.018. I think it was 0.04. So at least double what the maximum we could go to now, but we'll check those numbers for you. But Met provided that in the last workshop that they had.
Well, unfortunately, I missed that workshop because I was in DC at the Aqua federal deal back there. So, but to answer your question too, I mean, you're talking about, and I'm sure Kevin will correct me if my numbers are off, but you're talking about state water project cost at the 700 million mark, somewhere around there, and property, the ad valorem collection is about 121 million. So you're talking about a big gap that we can make some headway on and try to figure out. And that's really a lot of discussions that have been going on, not just the Camp for Water, but the long-term financial model, because the water sales are going down, because we're asking people to conserve, and so people aren't buying as much water, and member agencies aren't moving water, and they're coming up with their own projects and offsetting and doing a lot of different things. So the business model is kind of we're at a cusp here that we need to take a look at what the business model is sustainability-wise for us moving forward at Metropolitan in order to figure out how to balance that $2 billion a year budget.
So, as you might imagine, with 26 member agencies, there's not general agreement that that's the best path. There are some that feel much differently. So it's going to be quite the discussion over the next couple months. So we'll see how it goes. But just wanted to give the board a little feel for, where we're spending a lot of our time. The other Met issue that I spend a lot of time on is their Camp for Water program. This is Climate Adaptation Master Plan. So I was up there last week for a day. We have another full day training session. I'm not sure what they're training me to do. That's coming up in 2 weeks. And then, so there's a lot of discussion about the base of the program is what projects should be built in the future to adapt to climate change so we have a resilient water future at Metropolitan. Right now, we're having a lot of arguments over other things at camp, like, affordability of water and how we're serving disadvantaged communities and what the regional gallons per capita per day should be for the Met service area. All of which I think are kind of noise as to what the real issue is how are we going to find the money and prioritize these very big, expensive projects like Sites Reservoir, Delta Conveyance, West Side storage to match Diamond Valley on this side, we need side, and Pure Water. How are those programs going to be funded? How are we going to prioritize them? How are we going to score those to put the right mix of project portfolio together? Right now, we've really augured in on these other issues that have really stalled the progress of camp. So I'll continue to be up there and advocating to stick to our priorities and stay focused, people. But it's been a bit of a challenge. And I think what they decide now is in April they're going to generate a report to the whole board on the progress of camp. They originally said camp will be over in March, which is now. We're in March, right? And so it's supposed to be over now and decided, and we're behind. So they're going to generate a report back to the board. Other things, is an Urban Water Conference in Palm Springs, really good conference. Candy is here somewhere. Hi, Candy. That's Candy. Candy organized lunch with our MOU and COU groups last week. So we sat down and we had nothing to talk about, which is really good with our association groups, but we wanted to talk about things. And so we initiated the meeting. They didn't initiate the meeting. We're not close to meeting with them or needing to renegotiate. But I just think it's really important that we stay engaged with the association groups and we pepper them with questions. Hey, anything, you're hearing anything, you're concerned about anything. We want happy employees and we want a happy association. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're addressing anything that comes up. I had also met with the general manager of Fallbrook Public Utilities. You may recall Fallbrook is one of the two agencies that left San Diego Water Authority and joined Eastern. So I met with Jack Beebe, their general manager, yesterday. We had a great conversation. Really interesting to hear kind of the path of how they got there. And so now, they're going to be within Eastern service area, so I consider them a neighbor now. And so it was really good to have some time to talk with him and actually talked about some interesting things that I hope will help out Western in the future. So really good meeting. Why does Western have the best employees ever? I just found this out. Charles Nepper from our wastewater team happened upon a vehicle accident on his way to work, and he got to the scene and car was turned over, person trapped inside. He pulled his truck in, turned all the lights on, protected the scene, helped remove the driver from the overturned vehicle, shared his jacket with the victim to keep the victim warm, waited till police and fire got there, and then went upon his merry way to treat wastewater for us after that. So, Chuck, great job. Finally, Derek Kwai is celebrating his 18th anniversary today at Western.
Hey.
That's all I have.
Okay. Directors' reports and requests. SAPA met February 20th, their regular meeting, and just took care of some routine stuff. MWD. Is there anything left?
Right, no, I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff, so obviously, the big conversation that's going on right now is all budget, and that directly affects us, it directly affects our member agencies, and so it's really all about doing the job that we need to, and trying to keep the budget as sharp as we can, the numbers down as low as we can, and continue forward with all the messaging. So I will be heading up there. We have meetings, committee day next Monday, and then board day is next Tuesday, so I'm sure I'll have more of an update for you at the next board meeting.
Okay. Chino Basin Water Master is me. They did meet last month. It was all routine stuff except the closed session, which I can't talk about. But they are in the process of recruiting a new general manager. I anticipate that there will be a public meeting, special meeting next week at which a contract is likely to be considered. And that's all I can say about that. Although if you nose around, you'll probably be able to learn some things if you care that much. Let's see. CDA. That's tomorrow. Yay. RCRA.
We met February 22nd. We had a lot of routine items, and a lot of discussion was about the item 8C, which we approved today. So that's about it.
WRCOG.
WRCOG is, there wasn't a whole lot of really exciting stuff going on. Most of it is pretty status quo for WRCOG. We did in fact have the strategic planning session and the changes to the mission statement that kind of honed in more of what our mission is and what we're going to do. Water is obviously always on the top of the platform, and we're talking more and more about making sure that our legislative priorities are out there and we're messaging out as a unified group. I know Director Roten and I were on WRCOG several years ago where, you know, WRCOG put all of our memberships when we were advocating and writing letters up to the state to advocate for certain pieces of legislation. So I think we drifted off of that a little bit, and we're now getting back into doing that. And it comes across much better when you put all of the member agencies on there with the county, along with the 2 water districts, along with the mission band, along with the Office of Education. You know, it carries a little bit more when we write letters. So really glad that that's moving back forward, and we're seeing some more activity on that side. And that is about all that I have to report on that. They did welcome 2 new members to the committee. So from the city of Banning, Sherry Flynn, who is coming in new, and they had a change for Marietta because of the rotation. So Lisa DeForest is now representing on the executive committee, and I think Ron Holiday has moved to the alternate for that agent. So that's where we're at.
Great, thank you. Sarah.
We will meet next Tuesday.
Okay, Aqua Region 9.
Aqua Region 9, so the big thing obviously to talk about is the DC trip, and you know, it was great attendance. I was really entertained to see that so many people showed up. The the highlights of a couple of people, we got to go to the congressional speech program. So, you know, they scheduled us a room in there, and we ended up getting to hear from Congressman Calvert. I think he's, you know, he's so attuned to everything that's going on in the water world and what he's trying to do, and he's in such a great position being on appropriations, and listening to him, having people ask him questions that aren't as familiar with what he does in the room, I think was a really positive thing. We also had the commissioner come, Commissioner Touton come from, you know, and have a conversation with us. She was a little late, I guess, to our event, because the president was flying out and shut down everything in the streets, and she couldn't get to us, so we ended up having to do a long pause on our program that morning. But it was great. Always great to spend time with our DC folks. Andre was there and got to spend some time at dinner having discussions with some of our neighboring agencies, you know, to talk about our alignments and what our priorities and everything else are. So really great conference. The weather was a little chilly, certainly not Southern California weather, but nonetheless, it was a good trip, and I think it was very productive. So we do have a program that's coming up, and we'll be spending some time over at IEUA. They've offered to do the next program and the next tour, so be looking for that. I believe the date is coming up in, I believe it's April 12th. I believe that's the correct date. So you are certainly welcome to join in on that tour. They've got some really fabulous facilities, so if you're not familiar and have never been over there before, that might be a real great opportunity to see what they're doing as our neighbors to the north. So, and I'll keep you posted on any other programs that we have coming up. Ledge Day is coming up also for Aqua, so that's coming up in April as well. So if you wanted to fly up to Sacramento for that, you're certainly welcome to attend that. And then obviously Spring Conference is coming on, and that will be in May, and that will be also in Sacramento. So a lot of stuff coming out with Aqua right now, a lot of movement, a lot of things going on. We'll be talking about, too, at the next meeting when we have in April, potentially what our fall program will look like. So if you have suggestions for something that could be presented as a topic to the membership for the fall program and that conference, I certainly entertain any suggestions that you have.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Thank you. And Director Denstedt, we're going to go to director's comments now, and we'll just keep going from your end.
Oh, I think I've had enough today, so.
Okay,
all
Director
good.
Risby.
Thanks.
Same, no comments, thank you.
Director Roden.
I just wanted to share one event I was able to attend, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to Sarah to give the details, but we learned about it in this week's committee meeting, I think it was, it was last week because the event was last week. There was an assembly at Mission Bell Elementary School, which is in Jurupa Valley, and back in my past days, I was very in touch with our schools and that kind of thing. So being that it was water related, I thought I would like to go to that. So I did, and it was, oh my gosh, the students were so engaged, and the group that performed this mini play, I guess you would call it, presentation, very energetic, colorful, explained things, gave a lot of information in a short amount of time, but they explained it, I think, in a way that the children could absorb most of it. And I was proud to be there as part of Western, and Jeff was there, and he had arrived. I saw him in the parking lot and saw him unloading all his little giveaways that they gave to the students, and Clover was there from JCSD. So I was happy to attend that, but Sarah has a little more information on why that occurred and where it's occurring.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Director, and we're pleased to hear that you were able to attend and see our education programs and experiences firsthand. We are bringing the education assemblies back after quite a long hiatus. So it's really kind of our exploratory year to see how they work, how the assembly is received, and where we have opportunities for improvement. In addition to providing these assemblies within our retail service area, we are also extending them to our wholesale service area as well and coordinating with our wholesalers as best we can. So as you heard last week, we did host 14 assemblies at 5 elementary school sites, providing water education to nearly 2,800 students. These assemblies were delivered at Murrieta Elementary in our Murrieta service area. We also hosted assemblies at Mark Twain, Riviera, and Franklin in our Riverside service area. And as mentioned, we were at Mission Bell Elementary in the Harupa Community Services District. The assembly itself featured Aqua Avengers, which is a 25-minute performance that teaches students how to become water-saving superheroes. We know if we educate our students, that often trickles up to the parents. They get really engaged early on to learn about water and the possibilities of water, as well as the importance of it as a natural resource. Like I mentioned, we did recently bring these back, so we're listening to our teachers and our school sites to hear how we can improve next time around, including communication, some logistics, and also those items that the students best receive, as our very own in-house staff member, Jeff Diaz, as mentioned, was able to deliver those. So overall, great week for Western Water at our school sites.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Just a comment on the election which occurred yesterday. Just in Riverside County, there are more than 200,000 uncounted votes that are in the possession of the Registrar of Voters, and there are an unknown, but I would guess it'll push us close to 300,000 votes that are still, ballots that are still in the mail. If they were postmarked by close of business yesterday and received, I believe, by Friday at the registrar's office, they have to be counted. So the races that are close could very well shift, and you know, we'll see what happens. There is one consul race in the city of Riverside that I think the margin is 5 votes. Ward 3. Robillard is leading, and Avery. And you know, that may move back and forth. Brings back memories of when I was elected to the city council and ended up winning by 7 votes after a recount. So we'll see if that record gets broken. But we all have, for different reasons, some interest in, or special interest in some of those elections. And we'll know when we know. But some of them may take quite a while. The ones that are close, there may be a recount. So we may not know until sometime next month.
30 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's all I had. Does anyone have requests for future agenda items? Okay. We do have we have information on items in the packet. Take a look at that if you haven't. And we do have a closed session. Jeff, do you want to make that announcement?
Yes, the board will be going into closed session to discuss the 2 items that are listed on the agenda, 1 anticipated litigation, 1 existing litigation.
Do we anticipate a reportable action?
We do not, know.
Okay. So we will then adjourn into closed session. Let's take a 5-minute break on the way in, and we'll see everybody in the closed session room. And we'll come back and report out. We're ready? Okay. We have returned from closed session, and Mr. Ballinger, are you doing the report out?
I can, yes. Members of the board, members of the public, the board met in closed session to discuss the two items that are listed on the agenda. With regard to the first item, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation, the board voted 4-0 to initiate litigation. Further details will be made available once service is effectuated. Other than that, there is no reportable action.
Okay, thank you. Our next meeting is Wednesday, March 30th, and 20, yes, I'm sorry, March 20th. And with that, we will be adjourned.
Recording stopped.